I'm into preventative medicine. And my question is, where does preventative, if it does it play a role, preventative medicine? In other words, when we're doing preventative medicine, is it feeding into a fear basis? In other words, let's say we're doing preventative medicine and avoiding certain foods. Is that coming from a fear-based? And is it effective? Does it give us anything? Does it offer us anything physically? Or is it just beliefs?
Well, the basis of it is a little off-putting in this sense. When you are preventing, what are you preventing?
Degeneration, arthritic changes, different maladies, sure.
In other words, and so sometimes just the idea of the preventative medicine causes you to do a virtual reality about the things that you are preventing, which actually makes you more associative with them than otherwise. In other words, preventative medicine seems like a good idea rather than waiting until I get sick and then doing something about it. This is anticipating well-being in advance, as long as it is anticipating well-being in advance. And so it all depends on how optimistic of well-being you are and how preventative of not well-being you are. We even think that there would be better words that would be more like, I am allowing the well-being rather than preventing the not well-being. And as long as that is your mindset, then all is well. We think it is a wonderful idea to be sensitive to how you feel, because in the same way that you're wanting to choose your thoughts based upon how they feel, we would choose everything based upon how it feels. But the thing about so many things that are written in books is it's not leaving you the latitude to gravitate toward what you feel. Most people are not, first of all, keenly aware of what they're feeling until they overdo it. And so they have to do quite a bit of it before they begin feeling, and then it's almost gone too far for the guidance to be of any great value. And so a sensitivity to what you're feeling would be necessary. Again, we think it is much better to guide yourself from the inside. In other words, as you say, I want to feel good, and I know that I have eaten something in the past that I did not feel good, or I did not get the results I wanted. And while I was eating this in the past, I did feel good, and so I'm going to gravitate toward that. We think that's just fine. But those hard and fast rules often do not serve you very well, because your body is like a chemical factory that wants different things at different times. And sometimes a craving for something that is on the no side of your page in your preventative medicine book is exactly what your physical body is wanting in the manufacturing of something else that it wants or needs. And if you've said no, no, always no to that, you are not serving your body in the best possible way. We would think in terms of moderation. We would think in terms of balance. We would think in terms of following our impulse. The other day, Jerry and Esther were watching Lovable Cat. They call her Elsie. And she was eating grass. And Jerry said, I don't think she's feeling her very best. She had a big bump on her foot. She was limping around. And so then the next day she was eating grass. Now, she doesn't eat grass every day. It's not in her book. And she wasn't avoiding other things. She just was gravitating toward what felt best to her. And then Esther found a little pile of something in the garage that she had discarded. And then Esther knew why she had eaten the grass. And then she was perkier. You could tell right away that she was feeling better. She followed her impulse and knew what to do. And humans have the ability to do that too. You've just sort of overmanaged yourselves. So when you take something into your body that your body is not accustomed to, or that your body is not asking for or even wanting, but because it tastes good, or because someone else is serving it, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, whatever, you consume it. So your body right away knows what to do. Your body compensates for it. Your body is always bringing you into the very best alignment that it can possibly achieve under the circumstances in the moment. So your body compensates for this food that you've eaten. And in the compensating process, that compensation translates as a craving to you. In other words, what happens is you have ingested something more than your body wants, and your body deals with it. And in dealing with it, it revs everything up into high gear to deal with it. It gets momentum going in order to deal with it. And that very momentum feels like craving to you. In other words, that comes from someone who was not sensitive to the way they were feeling, who was not sensitive to the vibration of what they were eating, who was not intuitively eating. They were eating because it was before them, or eating based upon some other intention, got their body really activated with it, and then off they go into imbalance. But as with all things, this contrast then causes a rocket of desire to be born. And that rocket of desire then would bring you back into balance if you could find alignment with that desire.
Well, that's where preventive medicine would come in as far as I'm a teacher of preventive medicine. In
Yes.
other words, this is where I would let them know that they are in a negative cycle.
Yes.
And preventive medicine to me or unto them would be to help them break that cycle and get back to balance where they are in a feeling state where they can actually assess how they're feeling truly versus
we think that your process is a good one, and we think that the basis of it is solid. We think the foundation of it is absolutely accurate. Here is the only thing that we would emphasize in just a slightly different way, and you may already be doing it, and it is just the word preventative.
I think I know exactly where you're going, sure.
But once you have identified the path that would be most productive for someone, then get them to virtual reality about that. In other words, get them thinking about what does please them, what will serve them, rather than thinking about what they're not going to do.
Exactly.
Because nothing makes you want to smoke a cigarette more than talking about not smoking. And nothing makes you want to eat chocolate more than talking about not eating chocolate. Because the word chocolate activates it within you. In the same way that we were talking about, you've got these thoughts that are easily activated within you. You have thoughts about food that are easily activated within you too. So the virtual reality is the way you begin to activate the thoughts about food that are serving you better.
Right.
In time, once you've helped someone come back into balance, it is our absolute knowing that you could pretty much eat anything that is available to anyone by following the impulse that comes forth from within and stay in balance. But it's going to take some practice about being sensitive to what that balance is before you could even begin that. And what happens with so many, they don't trust themselves because they've tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed, but turning it over to someone that's outside of them isn't the best role either. And so if you can teach them how to be intuitive about the way they are feeling, then you've given them something that will really serve them. Guide them from the book in the beginning, but then teach them to be sensitive to their own needs.
That's excellent, because that brings me to my next question. What part does belief play in this? In other words, my mom's been smoking for 30-some years, and she believes that smoking is not going to really disturb her health. And at first, I tried to challenge that thought, and then I realized what I was doing is I was actually doing more harm, so I discontinued that. She said, "I don't inhale. It doesn't bother me. People have lived 100 and so forth, smokers." And so basically, even with food, for example, to what extent does our belief affect?
It's everything. Your belief is everything.
Which brings me to my next question.
That's
How do we change our
That's
beliefs?
why two different people can eat the same, and one can thrive on it, and one
Precisely.
can.
Exactly.
And so your next question is how to change belief.
I mean, of course, I know how to change beliefs. Just intent is a good starting point. But can you give some more tools to change beliefs?
Let's break it all down. There's desire and there's belief, but they are both just thoughts. And whether it's a thought called desire or a thought called belief, it's still a vibration. And all of those vibrations you have feeling responses to. So rather than getting complicated about changing beliefs, just begin saying, I'm going to choose thoughts that feel good when I think them. In other words, if you are sitting before a meal, a buffet, and you choose something that you believe is inappropriate, and you eat it, you're out of balance, and it cannot benefit you. In fact, you will probably get the detrimental result that you believe that you will get. If you believe that it is detrimental and you don't eat it, now you've changed the action, which you would think would make a difference in your experience. But as you now feel deprived, you're still not in balance.
Interesting.
And so what you're reaching for is to be in balance. The thing that we love most of all is to see someone joyously eating. And that's a hard thing to find in your culture today, because almost all of you have found something to be wrong with almost everything that you eat.
Precisely.
And so when you eat, it's usually not a pleasant experience. In other words, some people have got to the point that they only eat just for fuel, and they try to make it as brief as possible. They try to eliminate the experience as much as they can. Other people feel uncomfortable every time they eat and receive the detrimental results. We are in agreement with your mother. If your mother absolutely believes in her well-being and does not feel hindered by the cigarettes that she smokes, she will not be hindered by the cigarettes that she smokes. But that's a hard platform to stand on in this environment today, where almost everybody is wanting you to feel guilty, if not for you, for them, about your smoking.
And one other question. In what I do some mind-body work and different things like that. Is it of benefit to them to actually identify to them that that's the cause, and then go through a step of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, find the good and the lesson in the experience? Or should I just direct them towards this is going to, you're going to do well, this is going to improve, everything's flowing better?
Well, of course, they fit together so nicely, and you are a teacher to the very core of your being. Mm-hmm. But they've come because they want you to do something with their body. They don't want philosophy from you, usually.
Right.
And so we would give them that, and we would begin there. And then if they are recurring clients, and most of them are, in other words, you get to develop a relationship with them, then it is beneficial for you to eventually begin to express to them your understanding of allowing. And say to them, I am not a healer in the sense that I have power that I am giving to you. All I'm doing is helping you to access your natural state of well-being. That's the general message that you're wanting to give to them. And you can even get into these places where someone will come in, they'll be all balled up, and you can say, all right, what is it? Something's on your mind. And then say, well, I really don't want to know what's bothering you. What I'd really like to do is distract you into a thought where you're not bothered, so that you can begin to allow your well-being to flow. And eventually, if they're willing to listen long enough, you can teach them about virtual reality. You can teach them about pivoting. You can teach them about choosing the thought that feels best. You can help them understand that well-being would be their experience unless they're doing that thing that doesn't allow it. And every time they're doing that thing, negative emotion is present. You could eventually help them to understand that first there's negative emotion, and then there's discord in their body, and then there's illness. This is the way the track follows. In other words, it's all about lesser and greater degrees of resistance. That's all that it is. And so when people come to a physician and they want a pill or a surgery or a therapy, very often they can receive it, because in the midst of their struggle, they have a strong rocket of desire, and when they go to the healthcare professional, they have belief in the outcome, and so often they can find remedies. There are a lot of wonderful remedies that take place in these settings, but almost always there is another reoccurrence and another reoccurrence and another reoccurrence, because they are not understanding what causes it to begin with. And so certainly you're wanting to deal with what's most immediate, but it's also so loving to help them to understand gently how they got there. Because in the same way that you teach them to release this one, you help them not attract the next one. In other words, that might be the very best understanding of preventative medicine. In understanding how to release the resistance here and now, we're also talking about how it will never come back. And is that not the best preventative medicine you've ever heard?
I believe it was last month's tape or the month prior to that, I think it was the mother that was speaking regarding her son that had schizophrenia or something like that. And the question is, should I try to find out what the underlying emotion was, and again go to that process of in other words, I'm looking for the cause. Was it an emotional? Was it a physical? Was it a nutritional trauma? Or should I look for the cause, or should I just...
We can tell you what the cause is every time, if you want to know. It's someone's natural instinct for freedom in an environment, maybe general and maybe specific. In other words, it might be a mother and it might be a society that suppresses. And so the individual does not feel free to be who they feel like being, so they suppress only to have another part of them find freedom through another personality. And the more personalities that come up, the stronger the suppression has been. In other words, that's always what it is. When we were talking earlier about how you find yourselves behaving one way with one person and another with another, so someone who has a lot of different personalities may very well be someone who is just easily activated by whatever is surrounding them. And since there are rivers or currents or streams of thoughts, some people become very pliable in that regard, you see. But always it is because they feel unable or incapable or not allowed to allow who they really are to flow. And always the remedy is a soothing of them. It is a unconditional loving of them. It is an accepting of them as they are.